I'm Christina, 25 years old. Despite having a job and studying, I'm often perceived as someone who doesn't do much, especially by my family. They think this way because I tend to keep to myself and rarely discuss my activities, particularly with my brother. How did I end up this way? It all started back in middle school when I began feeling like I couldn't trust people. It wasn't just one event that led to this, but a series of experiences that made me feel ignored. I always had a deep interest in machines, especially computers, which didn't seem to captivate the people around me. This passion set me apart and, unfortunately, contributed to my sense of isolation. As a child, I enjoyed tinkering with computers. I was good at it, which was useful around the house, but my fascination with technology came at a cost. My grades started slipping because I spent more time with computers than with friends, and this worried my parents. When I moved on from elementary school, my parents began scolding me, urging me to spend less time with machines. Their constant reprimands during middle school made me feel like my interests were a mistake. To avoid their disapproval, I started retreating to my room, cutting myself off from the outside world. This withdrawal only made people think I was strange, which further isolated me, even at school. The one person who stood by me was my brother, Keith. He knew how to cheer me up and kept me going through tough times. With his support, I managed to finish school, but instead of going to high school, I chose to work from home on computer-related jobs. By the time I was 16, I had a part-time job, and with the money I earned, I bought old computers to take apart and rebuild. This hobby eventually became a business opportunity. By the time I was 20, I was making and selling computers, and soon after, I started my own business, offering affordable computers. By 25, I had earned a decent amount of money and even contributed $2,500 monthly to my parents' household expenses, while still having enough left over for myself. Even though I tried explaining my work to my parents, they never really understood it. After a few arguments, they decided that as long as I could support myself, they wouldn't interfere, allowing me to live as I pleased. However, my brother's attitude towards me changed. He had been my ally during school, but as I continued to live at home, working with computers even after turning 20, he started treating me harshly. This change in his behavior led to more conflicts between us, and we eventually grew distant. Things got worse after he got married. His wife, who had known him since high school, never liked me. After hearing about me from my brother, she didn't want to be my sister-in-law and seemed to influence him against me. As a result, I became known as the troublemaker at home, even though I mostly stayed in my room. The hostility from my brother and his wife was different from my parents' concerns. The home that once felt like a sanctuary started to feel hostile. My parents seemed to be swayed by my brother's perspective, and I felt like I was losing my allies. Despite contributing significantly to the household, my brother and sister-in-law saw me as a burden. They started talking about kicking me out and taking over the house. Feeling disconnected from my brother and his plans, I began to consider leaving. Once I found a new place, I wouldn't have to contribute to household expenses anymore, which meant I could save that money instead. As I was contemplating moving out, my brother suddenly brought up the topic of inheritance. He suggested that since he and his wife would be taking care of our parents, they should inherit all of their assets and that I should give up my share. The truth was, the reason our parents could enjoy their lives without financial worries was because I was covering their living expenses. But my brother saw me as nothing but a burden. Despite feeling that leaving was the best option, I decided to ask him one last time out of kindness, "Are you really okay with me leaving?" He just laughed and said, "We'd be happy if you left already." His response made it clear how little he understood or cared. Determined to leave, I started preparing to move out. My brother and sister-in-law were relentless in their efforts to get me out, even convincing my mom to stop cooking for me and telling me to do my own laundry. But these were all things I would have to do if I lived alone anyway. I wasn't about to sit back and let them push me out without a fight. They seemed to forget that I was skilled with computers and didn't realize the power I had at my disposal. I wasn't the type to quietly obey and leave. They were so focused on their plans, including my brother's marriage and the prospect of giving our parents a grandchild, that they didn't see how wrong it was to force me out. So, I decided to set up a little surprise for them, a trap that would activate as soon as I left the house. After finding a new place to live and completing all the necessary arrangements, I was ready to leave. Just before departing, I left a farewell message for my parents and brother. I reminded them that I had been supporting the family financially and that they had forgotten all the good I had done. I hoped they would eventually realize who the real burden on the family was. My parents seemed surprised for a moment, but they probably trusted that my brother would figure things out somehow and brushed off my words as mere bitterness. After leaving, I took a significant amount of equipment from my family home and bought additional items, along with necessary furniture and appliances for my new place. I set up my new home just the way I wanted, decorating it in my favorite style and creating a cozy atmosphere. It turned out to be the perfect environment for me to work in, and surprisingly, living alone wasn't as intimidating as I had thought. In fact, I wished I had made the move sooner. The people in my new neighborhood were friendly, and life was comfortable. Since leaving my family home and taking care of everything on my own, I've been enjoying myself and trying out new experiences. As I reveled in my newfound independence, I couldn't help but wonder how things might have been different if I had made this decision sooner. After I left my family home, things started to deteriorate there, especially since they lost my financial support. Out of the blue, my mother called me one day and asked, "Hey, Christina, did you do something to our machines?" I was confused and replied, "What do you mean?" She explained, "There's something wrong with the computers and other electronics." Completely puzzled, I said, "I have no idea what's going on." In the past, I used to help them out for free because they were family, but after how poorly they treated me and kicked me out, I told them that from now on, they'd have to pay the regular price for my services. They were shocked and accused me of being greedy, saying, "We're your parents. Can't you give us a discount?" I responded, "Well, I prefer giving discounts to my friends. Unlike you, they treat me well." They grumbled, calling me cheap, but I stood firm. Internally, I felt relieved that I had handled the situation without falling into another trap. However, my mother didn't appreciate my response. She abruptly hung up on me like a sulking child, and even sent a spiteful email suggesting that people like me would lose friends. It made me question who was really acting like the mature one. Frankly, her behavior seemed self-centered, if not outright selfish. As for the family computer, I had simply restored all the adjustments I had previously made for free back to their original settings. To someone unfamiliar, it might have seemed like the computer malfunctioned on its own. When I suggested they contact the company for repairs, they got upset, which I expected, so I let it go. 6 months after I left home and started my new life, my father called me. "I hate to ask, but can you lend me some money?" he said. I was taken aback and asked, "What do you mean, lend you money?" He explained, "Your brother and his wife have been spending recklessly. They think we're rich and keep complaining, asking for money to buy this or go there." I was frustrated and replied, "I have no idea about any of this. Why do you always come to me with everything? I've heard of daughters who live alone sending money home, but parents asking their children for money. Shouldn't it be the other way around out of generosity?" "It's not that simple," he answered, trying to justify the situation. "Even $500 would help." But I had made up my mind. "I'm not giving you anything, and I won't lend you money either. I have no intention of financially supporting you anymore," I stated firmly. "Of course, I'll work on your machines if you pay for my services," I added calmly. His response was to accuse me of becoming stingy. "I guess Mom was right about you," he grumbled, bringing up complaints about my unemployed years. But I didn't let it bother me and ended the call. My father didn't send any more emails, but he started calling me multiple times a day, which I found incredibly annoying. What troublesome parents I have, I thought to myself. A few days later, my brother called. sounding desperate. When I asked why they kept contacting me, he hesitated before asking, "Do you know why our family was wealthy?" It seemed like he suspected their financial situation had worsened since I moved out, but it was too late to change anything. My current home had become my sanctuary, the center of my work and life. I had no intention of leaving it again. Could it be that our family's wealth had been supported by the $2,500 I was contributing each month? I pondered this and realized that although I didn't have to give that much, I felt grateful for my upbringing and willingly contributed more. But now, why would I continue supporting a home that had kicked me out? It didn't make sense. When my brother realized this, he admitted, "So that's when Mom and Dad's finances took a hit." "I'm sorry," he added. "But even if you ask me to come back, I have no intention of doing so," I replied firmly. "I understand now that what happened was wrong," he said, but I told him it was too late for apologies. "I have no plans to have any involvement with you in the future. Please don't call me anymore." "Hey, wait," my brother protested, but I ended the call. When I left home, I had vowed never to be drawn back into their drama. Forgiving them wasn't something I could do easily, so I decided to cancel my cell phone contract to avoid the constant calls. 5 years passed, and I moved on with my life. I got married and started a new chapter. My partner was in the same line of work as me, so he understood my lifestyle and helped with household chores. Although I thought about reaching out to my parents, especially since they were technically family, I felt it was too late. I hadn't made any attempts to reconnect. However, my husband expressed an interest in meeting my parents and learning about their current situation. To gain some insight, I hired a detective to investigate. What we discovered was shocking. My parents, desperate to maintain their lifestyle and keep my brother and his wife tied to the family home, had accrued a mountain of debt from various lenders, with no hope of repayment. The debt continued to grow with accumulating interest, leaving them in a dire situation. The debt from my parents alone exceeded $100,000, and their house had been used as collateral. Where our family home once stood, there was now only an empty lot. Although I felt a twinge of sadness due to my sentimental attachment to our family home, I couldn't help but think that my parents were facing the consequences of their actions. I decided to look into my brother's current situation as well. It appeared that he had suggested a divorce due to his wife's extravagant spending habits, but she vehemently opposed the idea. They were now embroiled in a drawn-out divorce lawsuit, draining both their time and finances. His wife had hired a lawyer and was resisting the divorce, refusing to let go of my brother, leaving them at an impasse. Despite rumors, my brother and his wife hadn't yet had children. To confirm this, I sent the detective to the hospital where they were being treated. It turned out my brother was indeed infertile, nearly incapable of producing sperm, making natural conception highly unlikely. My parents, who had pinned their hopes on having grandchildren from my brother and his wife, were deeply disappointed, and they eventually ended their cohabitation. The family home had to be sold to settle the debt, marking the sad state of our family. This distressing reality became apparent after just a cursory investigation. It was evident that engaging with them in this condition wouldn't be beneficial for me or my husband. Now, I have a loving husband, for children, and a dog. We've purchased a spacious home and are living the life my family once dreamed of. If they were aware of our situation, they might try to exploit it, which I couldn't bear. As soon as I learned about this, I went to the local office and arranged for my personal information to be accessible only through formal disclosure requests. I made a conscious effort to keep my distance from them and asked my husband not to engage with them regarding our marriage. Although he seemed disappointed at first, after I explained the situation, he understood and hasn't brought it up since. I hope that once things settle down at my family home and the time for reconciliation arrives, I can rebuild a relationship with my parents and brother.